For the past 3 months, my family and I have been living this nightmare of not knowing the nature of the allegation, not knowing the status of the investigation, not knowing whether or not I'd be charged. My legal team has repeatedly contacted prosecutors to seek any information with no success.
That is the voice of Major General Danny Fortin speaking outside a Gatineau police station on Wednesday. And this is a case that has always kind of rubbed me the wrong way, because there is no due process in what I see as nothing short of a David versus Goliath fight, where you've got this top-ranking decorated officer of the country now accused and charged with a crime dating back almost 40 years, and yet he has no idea what he's done. And the allegations have cost him his job, which was leading the vaccine rollout, and yet the Trudeau government, up until very, very recently, has refused to hand over documents that he needs in a civil matter that he has issued against them in a timely manner so that he can defend himself and find out what he's accused of. And, you know, the military, as you know, is embroiled in numerous sexual misconduct crises cases. But this one, to me, does not sit well. It has this eerily similar feel to it as the case against Vice Admiral Mark Norman, another officer who was accused by this government, yet couldn't get documents to build his case, not for like months upon months upon months. His reputation dragged through the mud until eventually he was cleared thanks to the help of one Marie Heenan. Now, in this case, Fortin denies any wrongdoing in a case where his lawyers believe the timing of this case is politically motivated. Natalia Rodriguez is one of the lawyers for Major General Danny Fortin. She's also a partner at Conway Litigation, joins us now. Good to have you, Natalia.
Thanks for having me, Alex.
Now, the Major General Fortin is charged with sex assault, but there's two cases here because he's also suing the Trudeau government to get his job back. So there's two different matters before the courts right now. But the allegations, you know, he still does not know what he has done wrong, not just when it comes to why he lost his job, but now of what he is facing as far as this allegation that dates back to the military days of college. Am I correct?
That's right. So for the past 3 months, Major General Fortin has been living under a cloud, having been removed from his position at the Public Health Agency of Canada, but not knowing what the allegations against him are. So he was informed in March of this year that there was an investigation into sexual misconduct dating back several decades, but he was not told what the nature of those allegations were precisely. So it was a vague allegation as far as what he was told of sexual misconduct, and he was not given any details. Now, he remained in his position for 2 months after being informed that investigation had been started. And then in May, suddenly, from his view, out of the blue, he was told that he had to go. And this was told to him by the acting chief of defense staff, who, as listeners may know, is the top-ranking military official within the Canadian Armed Forces. And he is the person who is in charge of all staffing decisions within the military. And so under the National Defense Act, he is the one who should be determining the staffing decisions and whether somebody should be removed from their position or not. And he, the decision maker, the person who was supposed to be making the decision, told Major General Fortin that, in fact, it was ministers who wanted him removed, and that the political calculus had changed, and therefore he had to leave immediately. So he was informed on May 13, and he was gone the following day. He was not afforded any procedural fairness. He was not told why now. Why did he have to leave now after being there for 2 months while the investigation was ongoing? What had changed to trigger that removal? He still doesn't know. The only explanation he was ever given was that the political calculus had changed.
Right, and it strikes me as odd because I remember, the memo came out on my show late Friday night, but yet there he was on TV during the afternoon talking about vaccine, issues. The government knew about these allegations 2 months before, so it begs the question, if they were so concerned about it, why then did they wait the 2 months? But to your point, he then had to go and hire lawyers at his expense to get into a court just to find out why he was fired. He didn't have any clue. And you have a right, once you're accused of something, to defend yourself. And what we saw in this case, but we also saw this in the Vice Admiral Mark Norman case, government lawyers either dragging their feet or forgetting to show up with documents. But what they did was not provide documents in a timely manner so that he can defend himself, figure out what his next steps are. It was only because a judge finally ordered these documents be turned over. But we still haven't seen all of the disclosure in his civil action, which of course isn't the same as a sexual assault charge, but they are in the sense that he still doesn't know what he's done.
Exactly. So I'm involved in the civil case. I'm not part of his criminal team, although I am up to date on what's happening there. But I can tell you that on the civil side, Major General Fortin, we issued a notice of application against the government, questioning the decision, asking that the decision to remove him and to make the reasons for the removal public, because as you know, there was a press release by DND, the Department of National Defense, indicating that he was being removed because of an investigation into his conduct. And so we are questioning why that had to be released to the public when there was an ongoing investigation. That type of information should be kept confidential until the conclusion of that investigation. But instead, a news release was given out indicating that he was being removed because of an investigation that he was the subject of. And so we're challenging that decision, the decision to remove him at that time and the decision to make the reasons for his removal public. And so, when something like this happens to someone in government, when government action affects a person's rights, affects their interests, affects their livelihood, individuals have a right to something called procedural fairness. The government can't take unilateral action against you without you having some due process. And in this case, due process would have looked something like the Major General having an opportunity to know why it is that he was being removed at that time, being able to make representations as to why he should or shouldn't be removed, so making himself heard, his position heard, and then having some sort of written reasons for the decision. In this case, he wasn't afforded any of that. He was simply told, don't come in tomorrow. You're done.
Right.
Right. Go ahead.
I was going to say the presumption of innocence was removed right from the beginning, which in this country used to be a thing. But to your point about those memos, which we did get some disclosure on, it very much reveals this scene of chaos behind closed doors about, oh my God, will this bring the government down? They were more worried about political optics than any due process. And for them, look, this officer is now up against government lawyers with endless means. He's forking money out of his pocket, which, if they drag this on for a couple of years, not only destroys this man financially, but the details of these allegations are so opaque that it's been left now to the court of public opinion, to kind of make a judgment, which happens too often these days. And frankly, when you're up against these kinds of allegations, his reputation is destroyed.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that we are pointing out in the application in federal court, is that the reputational damage that he has suffered is devastating. And even just saying that there was an investigation into him, and then the Minister of National Defense made some comments to the press later that day and the following day, making insinuations about the culture, a toxic environment, that he wants to put aside those old cultural norms and toxic environment, and he talked about there being a complainant. So from those comments, the public could surmise what the investigation was about. But of course, they didn't give the context, which is this is one alleged incident from 33 years ago, that it's a historical allegation. It's not something that's happening now that he's being accused of today. And so that doesn't provide the context that necessary for the public to understand that, this is what's actually happening. So everybody makes their own conclusions. They jump to their own conclusions. And as a result, his reputation has been severely affected. And I just want to comment on your point about government resources and the government lawyers, trying to hide documents. And so I just want to talk a little bit about what's happened in that process. The government's position in this case was that the case of Major General Fortin did not need to be expedited through the courts. It did not need to be heard on an expedited basis, which we argued it did need to be heard on an expedited basis. They were looking to delay this as much as possible. So
yes, of course.
They tried to delay it. We were granted an earlier hearing date, and the hearing date has now been set for September 28 and 29. They also dragged their feet in providing disclosure to us in that civil case. They were supposed to provide documentation relating to the decision to remove him and to make that public within a certain number of days after our filing, and they didn't do that. They simply didn't provide anything. Finally, with a court order, they were forced to hand over documents, which they did. But when they did that, what they provided us with were 2 notebooks, one notebook from the acting chief of defense staff and one notebook from the brigadier general. They did not provide any documentation from any of the ministers that we had named in that application, the Minister of National Defense, the Minister of Health, the Prime Minister of Canada, and the Clerk of the Privy Council, who we say were involved in the decision to remove him, which was improper political interference. So, but the notes that we do have are actually helpful to us, very helpful, even though they refuse to provide us further documentation that we say is also relevant, because those notes show that at the time, in April and May of 2021, when this was all happening, the investigation and the backdoor conversations about what should be Major General Fortin's fate, they were very much concerned about the political optics. And so there are notes from meetings regarding this situation in which the acting chief of defense staff writes, government could fall, political lens, political concerns. And so that was very much at the forefront when this decision was made. And that's not what should have been at the forefront. It should have been what is due process? What is this decision going to do to his reputation? And how can we ensure fairness for the process while acknowledging that there has been an allegation that's been raised, and that needs to be dealt with properly as well. So we need to be fair to all parties here, and that's not what has been happening so far.
No, and sadly, we have seen so many people thrown under buses for political gain or political protection when it comes to this particular government that certainly it's a case that we will keep our eye on, and that's why it reminded me a little bit of the Vice Admiral Mark Norman case. Natalia, thank you very much for joining us. I hope to talk to you again.
Thanks for having me, Alex.
Natalia Rodriguez is just one of the lawyers helping Major General Danny Fortin in his case.